Ah,
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Reimagining Work podcast with Roger Nort and John Wenger, speaking across the English Channel. And episode 4 is entitled Planet Social Business. And Roger, you and I have had several conversations about social business and what it means. And in some respects, I think there'll be a group of people who listen who would be aligned with my understanding, which is minimal, and a group of people aligned with yours, which is vast and very capable. And I think it's a useful thing to have this conversation with a genuine naive, because I have some questions that I'd like to use today for a conversation as a bit of a structure around social business. Speaking across the English Channel.
right.
What was that?
That was like the same thing that happened last time.
Oh.
But when you start the broadcast and it's in the screen behind, and then it starts playing once the broadcast is started, it's completely and utterly ridiculous that it happens. But I'll cut it out, and you just otherwise you have to start the intro again. So just start with, we've had a conversation of many conversations.
Okay. And you and I, Roger, have had many conversations about social business, and I think it would be useful to structure today's conversation around some of that and see if we can condense it to around about 30 minutes.
Yes.
I guess the starting point for the title came out of one of our conversations, and a picture came to me of a whole planet that I'm not sure I've actually visited, and this sort of metaphor of planet social business came into my head. And I suppose the first question that I sit with when I think about the term social business is, what does it actually mean? And if there are some things called social businesses, what would be called businesses that are not, quote, social?
Well, to answer the last question, it's just a business. So there's not much to it. They just do what they need to do and get on with it. And so I guess that's just a pretty boring planet, if you want to. And once you get into the social business area, if you will, or the planet, if you will, it all gets very much more interesting, and I think, especially for employees, a lot more rewarding.
Okay. Just as a naive in this sort of area.
Yes.
What roughly would you say was the proportion of businesses which are social and not in the modern workplace?
I think you're looking at like a 20-80.
20 social and the rest not.
Yes. Having said that, there's obviously a tremendously large amount of shades of gray, and where you have at one end of the spectrum, you have a business that is as old school, command and control, and rigid as they were at the beginning of the industrial age. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have businesses which are trying to be completely social and innovative, and living on the edge, on the far edge of.
Okay. So I guess this is where I tap in to social business, not coming at it from, say, a technological background, but more the work I do is around developing, people developing themselves in relationships. So that's the social aspect of it. It's the innovative thing that you've just mentioned, which is where I get interested and think that I partly belong to that tribe of people generating greater social business in the world. Yeah. Okay. So that would be the one end where they're highly innovative. You've mentioned command and control, so there's something in there for me which says social business is something quite revolutionary, moving away from old industrial structures and mindsets of how businesses get set up.
Yeah.
Okay.
it's very fundamental to begin with, and for instance, it's especially difficult for businesses that are very old and very traditional. Family businesses, for instance, have a very hard time making a switch into, you can call it social business, but having difficulty switching to the 21st century in general. If you take the definition of a definition of social business, and you take Peter Kim's definition, he says social business draws on trends in technology, work, and society. And that means that you're very much in tune with the now, with the world that we live in now, with this planet, and not with the planet that is already 100 years old in some cases.
At least, yeah.
Yes, and this goes actually for some companies too, right? They've been around for that long, and it's very difficult for them to stay in touch and to keep going at that pace and that level. And things change faster and faster and faster. I mean, you have that. I don't know the technical terms of that, but we're working. Everything develops quicker every time. Same with data storage or the price of memory for a computer, or 20 gigabytes of storage 10 years ago would have been unimaginably expensive.
So you're saying those three trends that you identified that Peter Kim talks about: technology, work, and society. The changes in those three domains are accelerating. So it's about how social business is around being relevant in the context of those three trends shifting so dramatically. Okay.
Yeah, technology obviously is accelerating quicker than the other two. That's just the nature of the beast. I mean, there's a certain drive to develop technology, and once you reach that point, you can reach that point. Society moves a little bit slower, and work is somewhere caught in the middle. But the changes in society can happen fast. You've got these jumps that you have. And the latest jump that we've had was since the 2004, 2005, and we've entered the social era, right? And we've already entered the digital era, but now we're in the social era, and it's changing the way that we communicate with each other, that we see the world, that we get our information, and the way we share information. It's just, I mean, the fact what we're doing now. I mean, we would not have been able to do that 10 years ago.
No, it would have been unthinkable, really. That I wouldn't have considered it as possible. Absolutely.
It's just not. And, I mean, we could have recorded some sort of broadcast, but chances are we would have been, it would have been necessary to be in the same room, or we used to, like a phone, in order to make the connection. Doing it the way we're doing it now is just, I mean, 10 years ago, forget about it. You would not have been able to do that. And but we are getting comfortable with it pretty quick, and that means that people get used to it and people want it because it's the way we communicate these days. I mean, my father-in-law, he might not. It's a big deal for him to send an SMS, to stay in touch, or even open an email. I mean, it's a challenge, and for us, but it's getting so much. Well, for me, even more than maybe for you, and so that's technology, and business have to keep up because society is the sharing. It's supported by technology, and it's translated in the way we work.
Okay, let's focus a bit on this bit here. When you said businesses need to keep up because, and I think it's the because that a lot of people get stuck. If you're suggesting that majority of businesses would not be in the social realm yet, I'm thinking of two people very close to me in my life. One of whom is has reached the milestone of 70 years and delights in learning how to send a Pix text to me when she's out and about. The other person is younger than me and is a bit like King Canute and tries to keep the tide of technology back and sounds a little bit like a great-grandmother. And then, in the old days it was easier. We didn't have mobile phones. And I get a little bit frustrated sometimes when I don't get a text responded to, for example. So, but the because is really important, because there is a mindset shift that needs to occur. So there's a business that's been operating just fine, thank you very much, for 50 years. Suddenly these trends come along. Yes. They manage to install computers, and people use computers, and they send emails, and that's really quick and efficient, and isn't this fun? So why would I invest any more of my time and effort, if I'm running a business, in making that shift and migrating to Planet Social Business? That's the important question. Why?
Well, do you remember that funny thing called telephone?
Oh, yes.
Came out when you had a village where you had like number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you had Mr. Johnson who had a secret number, and then you had 7, 8, 9, 10.
I remember those.
Yeah. There was a time where executives said, well, I'm going to have a phone, my secretary is going to have a phone, but everybody else in the office, they're not going to need a phone. And because, it's fancy, it's technology is nice, but you don't need it. Same thing happened with email. The executives, they wanted to have email because it was a fancy new thing, and but the workforce, they could use paper, right? I mean, there even was a time where even Bill Gates said, like with I don't know, like a 10 megabyte memory thing, like we're never going to need more than that.
Yeah.
And now, I get a hard drive of 3 terabytes, and there's always a level of resistance with every new step in technology that we have. Always. But it gets accepted anyway. And you're going to see the same thing with Google Glass at some point. Everybody's going to go like, 10 years time, everybody's going to be recording whatever. You're going to have the feedback on your glasses, and it's just going to be mainstream. And as far as businesses go, yes, no, you don't have to, sure, but your competitor does. And if they're going to use the same technology, I mean, if you want to send a letter to a client and it's going to go via regular mail and it's going to take 2 days to get there, and your competitor sends an email and it takes a split second to get there, who do you think the client is going to be more inclined to work with? It's going to be you who sends the email, because it's just, and that kind of translates back to the whole evolution that we have as a society, because animals tend to evolve over millions of years. Humans have the capacity to change their environment overnight, and which is very interesting, because if you follow the technology, you always have something to look forward to. I mean, it's fun, but it's also very scary, and it also demands that humans stay in touch with that technology. And of course, you create a gap with people who don't stay with the trends, or people who choose not to play.
I mean, your statement, humans can make a change to their worlds overnight. Can we make a change to our mindsets overnight is the key one, because I've come back to your question about command and control. You see, in command and control land, there's a lot of vested interest in not giving up command or control. Yes. If you're somebody who has a little bit of that in your business. So why, if I'm running a business, would I want to give that up and release? Because you talked about it being on businesses being on the edge of innovation. Why would I want to release that? Why would I want to give up command and control of what goes on in my business?
Again, you get to some fundamental level, because otherwise you get way too deep into it. But if you let people, chances are, right? I mean, there's no guarantee, but if you let people collectively work on a problem, they're going to solve it. But you have to trust them
Mm.
and give them that trust that they can actually do that. And B, you have to let them be able to fail or come up with some. B is you might not know the answer.
Mm.
There's a reason why any president or whatever has a staff, because they help him with digesting the amount of information that comes in. There's no way he can do it alone, especially if you have a large company. There's no way you can absorb everything alone. You cannot micromanage everything within a company.
Sure.
And you can only set the broad business goals, and then you have to trust your managers to work that out.
Yeah, I mean, right now you're preaching to the converted, because this is where I tap in, and I'm absolutely, passionate about workplaces being places where power and control is far more dispersed throughout. It's not held in the hands of a few people at the top. I'm absolutely behind you on that.
Yeah, it is in combination with transparency, right?
Sure.
Because the command and control now it still goes down, and you still have to trust your manager in order to do what is necessary. But in the current structures, you have to blindly trust them, because you can't control them as you would like to.
So it's a two-way. So the in social business is a two-way thing. There's an openness and transparency in there.
Absolutely, it's no mirror. It's not like a one-way mirror or something. It's just a pane of glass, and it's not even bulletproof. It's just a window, and it goes both ways.
Yeah. So you're kind of hinting at some stuff that I've written about in the past around leaders and managers reimagining what it means, reimagining the job description, if you like.
Yes.
Reimagining what it is that their role consists of when they walk into the workplace every day.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it is quite a revolution. And again, that's the why. You've suggested, well, your competitors will be doing this, so there'll be things that you get left behind on if you don't keep up, and start yourself packing your bags to head towards Planet Social Business.
Yeah.
I'm interested to talk a little bit about information and communication, because the revolution, certainly from a technical side, which even I am aware of, it technically has changed the way I communicate, witness what we're doing now. Information is another one that I'm interested to hear a bit more from you about. Like, how is information treated differently? Because one bit of me is that CEO or the manager who's going, yeah, but if we open up this stuff, it's just floodgates of information, and actually we're doing fine, thank you very much. Do we really need more information? We've got all we need.
Well, you don't need to create more information. You just need to be able to control the information, or have it controlled. You don't, as a manager, you don't have to control every piece of information, but have the system control the information. And so it's more like proper management of the information. I mean, if you have Holland, for instance, right? I'm Dutch. I was born there, and we all know part of the Netherlands is below sea level. And if there's one thing that's extremely important in the Netherlands, it's water management, right? Every day, 24/7, every waterway, or it's all managed. And because they have to, because if they don't, it's going to flood within a matter of weeks, I think. It happens really quickly. If you use the water metaphor as your information, the Netherlands have control over their information very well. And it's part of their survival. But they're not creating more information, right? There's a finite amount of information. Obviously, a company creates information as it goes along, but you don't have to go out and make even more information. You just have to control it better, like a waterway, and make sure that it flows where it needs to flow, but that you can stop it where you need to stop it, or where you can collect it where you need to collect it, and it's a tagging thing, if you will, and it just makes sure that the information that's out there, that it's findable, and it's searchable, it's findable. People can find the information that they need quicker than they would be able to do it now. And it's not just one person that holds onto the information, right? The hoarding of information by certain people on Planet Social business, if you will. I mean, the information flows freely, and but the employee will only get the information that he or she needs. All the rest is not important, and he doesn't see it because it's outside its small realm of interest. But once he needs something from that pile or from that lake or whatever you want to call it, he can reach in and just grab it and use it. And in order to progress his own work. So it's not necessarily more information, it's just a better control of the information.
And certainly developing capabilities around managing information for oneself. I mean, I was thinking just there as you were speaking about Harold Jarche's work around personal knowledge management. I read a really interesting and very well written, as usual, blog by Richard Martin this morning around that work. So it is about developing the capabilities to manage information, because otherwise we will individually be overwhelmed by the flood of it. I mean, it stands to reason that if you unleash this amazing technology called email on people, everyone's going to use it. And I'm going to spend half my day, if I'm a manager, say.
It's a prime example of an uncontrolled flood. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no control, and well, some people control it very nicely. They have all the filters, and it goes straight into the appropriate folders, but some just have like one huge mailbox and go like no, whatever.
No, it was just me. Yeah.
Endless flow, and it's just an endless flow of information, and it's completely uncontrolled. And what you get, I mean, if the levee breaks.
Yeah, and you need to have a level where you don't get overwhelmed, because I think it's a very fine line that you cross, and suddenly you go into overwhelm, and your productivity. I mean, I think about speaking about myself. My personal productivity just drops if I just have a sense of overwhelm. If I've been involved in a project or something, and suddenly I get too much, and suddenly it feels like I'm not capable of doing anything. So there is something around, again, that's related to that mindset shift of what is it that you need to do to prepare yourself to go and live on Planet Social business? What are the capabilities?
Well, email is a very nice example of that, because it kind of cuts both ways. And it's the bad kind of cutting that it does. At one end, it's a dull night, rusty. And on one end you have the amount of information, which is a continuous flow of usually very unimportant things, but they need your attention anyway. And most of it, in some cases all of it, can be dealt with in another way, more productively. And the other bad side of it is that all the information that is stored in that email system is lost. Because the only one that has access to it is you. Nobody else does. And sometimes there's a lot of information in there. There's documents in there. People use it sometimes as document storage. You know, they need a certain document. They search through their email in order to find that document.
Hello.
Yeah, it's not very clever. I'm sorry.
I had different ways of working when I was working in concert with a team of 5 or 6 people. I'm working right now for myself and on my own, and I kind of see it as a good enough system. But I know exactly what you're talking about when you describe that. Very often my email box is my document storage box as well.
But you can find stuff.
Yes.
Right, but dare not work with somebody else.
That's right. It's a little bit like the don't tidy my mess, I know exactly where everything is syndrome.
Exactly, and if you're in a one-man show, then it's not very efficient, but it's not a huge big deal. But when you're in a company, especially when you're reaching like 5,000 people, I mean, the amount of information that's just gone, and that's corporate property, right? I mean, it's intellectual property of the company,
and it's collectively probably very useful as well. Beyond the legality of it, there's the usefulness of it.
But it's extremely valuable because if you put it all together, I mean, there's, especially within larger companies, there's people inventing the wheel over and over and over and over and over again. Sure. There's meetings being held which are completely useless because the information is already there or somebody already solved the problem in some cases, right? Or you can narrow it down, or you can structure it better with the information available, but you can't find the information.
Yes, that's
so. When you put the information in a central repository, and you make it findable, searchable, and taggable, and you do it in a platform which is, and now we're talking just about the available technology, right? And working with that technology. We're not even talking about being structured in your work, doing it continuously, or talking about communities or other powers that we can use in order to get a certain unity within the company and more engagement of the employees. This is just information that you're talking about. Be that as may, information is probably is the most valuable thing a company has.
Certainly more central to
its employees.
Absolutely, it's certainly more central to the way a business or the resources a business needs to operate compared to 100 years ago, when we used to make widgets in factories. I'm generalizing, of course, but when information is our currency, then it seems sensible that you would need to have ways of managing information, which is entirely different of managing an assembly line or something like that. Now, there was a quote in the foreword of your book, which is, you cannot opt out of being a social business, which is a challenging statement that suggests that roughly 80% of businesses which aren't there yet, they will be unable to resist the tide, if you like. That we cannot stop the tide. We cannot be King Canute and stop the tide from coming in. I'm also aware that our time is running out, but I think there's a further conversation that would be useful to have around that. If you can't opt out of being a social business, if that's true, then how can people begin to familiarize themselves? Because all the things you've talked about, I have pictures of just this huge plethora of technologies and useful tools and techniques and ways of operating. But I think the first bit is, so what would be the first phase that a business might need to undergo? It's a bit like going into a restaurant where you just cannot choose because the menu's too big. How do I, if I was trying to make my journey there to Planet Social Business, what would be some of the early things that I would need to familiarize myself with?
Is that a question now? Are we going to say that?
Yeah, it's rhetorical and it's a question now. I'm not going to ask you to give the whole answer. Well, but just I guess as a warm up to the next conversation, I think we need to have around this.
First, the thing that you're not able to opt out.
Yeah.
Is I believe that's true, and with me there's others. It's because society evolves. It's because technology evolves. It's because the way we work evolves. If you, as a company, do not evolve, you die. There's, I don't know the exact figures, but for instance, Kodak, for instance, it did not evolve. It died. There used to be cars that ran on steam cars. Took about half an hour to start one up. Once they run perfectly. And when the petrol engine came along, the guy who made the steam cars, he was like, meh, don't want it. Don't think, no, that won't.
It'll never take off. Yeah.
No, it stinks and it'll never take off. Well, he died, obviously. And you cannot opt out. I mean, we evolve, we continue, we grow. Sure. There's a new generation coming, and they're coming to work, and they go like, where's your social structure? Where's your knowledge base? How do I find information? Excuse me, you want me to walk across a floor asking people at random in order to find a certain document or something? Are you kidding me? Right? And so yeah, no, that's why you cannot opt out, because everything will come by. The tidal wave will. It'll run you over at some point. And that's an inevitability. I mean, that's been proven already. And where do you start? Start by taking a breath. And then you become aware of what's out there. And then you grow from there. You start with awareness and take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, as you speak, I'm beginning to answer a little bit the question that I posed you. I mean, I'm a student and practitioner of systems, and I'm fascinated by human systems. And one of the things that I remember being drummed into me when I was training in the methodology I use was you're working systemically. Start somewhere. Start somewhere, though.
Yeah.
Because you're not working linearly. It doesn't matter, but start somewhere. And in many cases, the way you start will get you some momentum. And once you're in momentum, and you're in motion, then you can change direction if you need to. So, I mean, I suppose answering that question to myself, as you said that, like take a breath, gain some awareness and of yourself, and start somewhere. I guess where is the first thing that warms up in you? What's the first picture that comes to you? And start there. But start, certainly.
Yes.
Well, we do need to wind up this conversation, but I think there's lots for the next conversation around social business, I think. And I guess it's the question that I'm sitting with and I'd like to pose to you is, are there phases that businesses go through? Are there any typical phases that businesses go through in order to become social? What are those transition phases? And maybe if there were some examples of stories or case studies that you are familiar with, it would be useful to get some of that so we get a picture of what it might look like, a business on its road, or maybe a business that got from non-social to social, if you like, would be useful, and some of the capabilities that people have had to learn on the way. So that's a flag for the next phase of this conversation of Planet Social Business, and I look forward to that conversation very much. But for this week, we need to wrap up.
But it's not the next episode, right?
Not the next episode. No, that will be the next phase of this conversation.
Right, okay, exactly.
Because we have as the next episode, it's entitled Beyond Empathy. And I will be speaking a little bit about role reversal in the workplace.
Yes.
But for this podcast, we'll say cheerio. So it's goodbye from me.
Yes, and me.
And we'll be in touch soon.
Yes.
Thank you for listening.